Welcome back into the channel. I am John Kurtz. I am joined now by Josh Furlong, who covers the Utah Utes. The funny story this week, obviously, has been the ACC rumors that came up. That's the one conference we have not mentioned so far in all of this. Basically, random New York Post sports writer floats it out there. It gets traction on Twitter. People start talking about it. How out of left field was that to you? The rumors about the ACC.
It was far out of left field. I mean, I feel like, you know, leaving the Pac-12, you're going to a conference, for the Big 12 that is stable now, right? Obviously, it had some instability for a bit, and there was questions, but there's no question that the Big 12 is stable right now. The ACC is on shaky ground right now, and even if that was a desire of Utah, you're sacrificing a future for what? North Carolina's probably going out. You've got Florida State going out. You've got all these schools that are potentially going out. And I don't know that that gave Utah a better destination. Maybe somebody on the academic side wanted to say we wanted to be attached with those institutions, but this really didn't make sense, right? That to me, this felt like somebody in the ACC land trying to float something to kind of try to destabilize some stuff. But it doesn't make any sense from a Utah perspective to be able to go from a conference that maybe has some advantages. If anything, I think it's a lateral move, and so it never really made sense. It doesn't fit with what Utah's been trying to do. So I don't know. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and I haven't seen anything or heard anything from anyone out here that kind of backs up that rumor.
A lot of people want to talk about like the grant of rights was the next thing that's getting brought up, like the next part of the rumor. Like, has Utah signed the grant of rights here? To your knowledge, have they signed the grant of rights for the Big 12? Because that would obviously be the thing that would lock them in.
Yeah, there was. I remember what was a few months ago with that. They had a different contract and everything as part of that. I haven't been able to get anything firm on that, so I'm not entirely sure. But my understanding is they've done everything to be a full member of the Big 12. So if that is signing in with them, then yeah, I would assume that's the case.
As a Big 12 fan, one of the things I'm most excited about with this new conference is seeing the Holy War be a conference game. So what kind of dynamic has that introduced now to this rivalry with both teams being back in the same conference?
I think it just brings a better passion, right? Before there was always the passion, but I think now that there's something at stake. For a while, Utah fans especially, Utah kind of brushed it aside and said this game doesn't matter. And for all intents and purposes, it didn't, right? Like other than just having bragging rights over, your quote unquote little brother or whatever you want to call it, it didn't mean anything in the standards of the standings. And so now to have that mean something, in a conference title race back from when they were in the Mountain West, that means something. That's where that rivalry starts picking up and starts having some fun. So here there's one half of me that hates that week because it gets a little crazy here and my Twitter mentions just get blown up. But I'm excited to see this in a more passionate atmosphere where there is something on the line. And obviously these two programs are at different spots right now. That's not to say BYU can't be where they need to be, but they're just not at the same level of where Utah is right now. And I think that's the fun of it, right? You can go into that. Utah can have a high standing, and BYU comes and beats them. BYU could have a high standing, and Utah comes and beats them. And so that's what I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see something that matters now instead of just this game that felt like a non-conference. Well, it was a non-conference game, but it had nothing attached to it other than just bragging rights.
Yeah, what in your time covering the team, like what was the fiercest era for the rivalry? Like when it was the most contentious between the two sides?
Early on when in my coverage, I mean, that was right after the Mountain West days. And so there was still kind of that love-hate relationship of having that. Utah felt like they had jumped to greener pastures. They were now included in the Power Five. And so there was a lot of vitriol back then. And BYU fans, they still didn't want to feel like they were some lesser team. And so there was a lot of, hostility there in terms of that. I will say, though, a couple years ago when BYU beat Utah, that was probably the most electric environment I've ever seen. That was at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. The fans showed up, and like the second I walked into that stadium, I knew Utah was going to lose. There was, Utah was the favorite team. They should have, on paper won, but BYU brought another vibe to that place, and it just was electric. Years before, in that kind of in between era, BYU was kind of consigned to the fact that Utah was the better team. They weren't going to win. And so it's kind of been this fun cyclical thing where at the beginning of Utah's Pac-12 tenure, there was this hostility, and then at the very end, that hostility returned. And so I'm curious to see how that transitions now in the Big 12 and kind of how that works out.
All right, so on the football field here, I mean, Cam Rising coming back from injury. Obviously, it's a program that's won the Pac-12 2 of the last 3 years. Is anything short of winning the Big 12 in year one a disappointment? Basically, the way like the fan base, for instance, would look at this in the Big 12.
I think it's not just the fan base. I think it is the athletic department. I think they have to at least get to the Big 12 championship. Their goal is the playoffs. They believe that they can be there. They've approached this season very much so in a way to be able to build towards that, right? I think you look in college football and it's so hard to be able to stay at the top for a long time. And so I think they're seeing with Cam Rising and all the people that they have coming back, this is kind of where they have to be, right? You have to be in contention for that. And obviously, they don't understand what all the Big 12 teams are going to be like, the makeup of what it's going to be like. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to it. But this is 100%, Big 12 championship or bust, playoffs or bust, whatever you want to call that. It's one and the same, in my opinion. And so I think that's how they're approaching it. Kyle Whittingham, always in spring, he's always been kind of a lot more loose and carefree and kind of a little punchy and having fun with the media. This year, he was far more businesslike, almost like he was in football season, right? He was very much so taking this seriously. He wanted to be able to get to where he needed to so that they could hit the ground running and fall. So more than ever, this year probably resembles the 2019 season when Utah was a playoff team. They were in that top 4 spot until they lost in the Pac-12 championship and had some problems there. But this 100% feels like it has to be in that destination, or it does feel like a massive disappointment.
Kyle Whittingham obviously is, I don't think anybody could argue that he's not one of the top, 10 to 15 coaches at least in college football with what he's been able to do. He's 64 right now. What are the vibes around like how long Utah expects him to be doing this? Is he a guy that's going to be doing it until you have to force him off the sideline, or is he wired a little bit differently than that?
It's both, right? I mean, I think he's wired in the same that he wants to be in football for as long as he possibly can be, right? He years ago he said he wanted to get out when he was 65. He wanted to spend time with grandchildren, but he's also found a way to kind of balance that a little bit more. He's busy, so don't. It's not like he's just found some more free time, but I think he's found a better work-life balance that allows him to be able to do it. And more recently, he's said that as long as he continues to love it, he's going to continue to coach. So there's all these rumors, right? Recruits always want to know it. I think they feel like they've got a good handle of the situation, because whether Kyle decides to call it quits after this year or 5 years from now, they feel like they have good consistency with their defensive coordinator, who assumingly will step in. Morgan Scalley will take over as head coach, and everything will kind of continue. So I think they feel comfortable with that. I think they understand that Kyle's kind of on borrowed time, but that borrowed time could be 10 years still, right? So I think it really is just going to come down to his personal feel. If Utah's still competitive and they're still competing for, a Big 12 championship or playoffs, or at least in that mix, and there's not anything crazy that happens in football that makes him not love it, he's going to stay in as long as he possibly can. So I've tried every single year to kind of get a take on that, and it's pretty much the same. It always continues to go back to, as long as I love it, he'll continue to do it.